Well, we're going to go now.
Since you mentioned the question about nature and the fact that there is an impact on biodiversity, I'd like to ask Mr. Mitsopoulos how, if those reactions are justified, the reactions that have to do with the impact on nature, the impact of RES on nature and biodiversity, how significant are those impacts, and what's the basis for the reaction? There's no single answer to this question. Our country has a large biodiversity, one of the first countries in a number of endangered birds and species. So we have established a program that we have a program that establishes the areas where we have such endangered species in order to protect them. And these areas, of course, are not a glass bowl that you cannot do anything with them. We are encouraging actions and projects to take place to the extent that they don't endanger those species. So they can be areas of development. That's now to the question of whether or not RES has an impact. Have an impact? Well, it depends. It depends on the RES type, and it depends on the size. For example, in an area, in a Natura area, a wind farm or a photovoltaic park may be installed for a specific number of panels or wind turbines, because from a certain degree, it starts to affect the species and the habitats. It also depends on the area, which Natura area it is being installed. A wind farm cannot have an impact in an area where we are protecting a lake or a river. But if the area is there to protect species of birds, the vultures, like we said before, of course the wind farm can have an impact. So we need to look at where each project, each RES plant is being installed. So the critical question here is to know that to have all the scientific facts at hand, and the licensing of such projects has to be based on scientific knowledge. So the entire procedure follows the same logic in order to protect biodiversity. Otherwise, we will come to the point of saying, okay, we encourage wind energy, but then we destroy nature, which is, well, that's the main reason for going after RES, to protect the environment. So I will now go back to Mr. I wanted to hear from Mr. Mitsopoulos, but we see that a lot of reaction comes from the environmentalists, but it's a success. It was a success. The fact that we're promoting now renewable energy sources was a win for the Greens, but now it seems like we have a green battle. But it's a little more complicated than that. I would say that, first of all, we are very late right now. The average temperature has already increased 1.1 or 1.2 centigrades. So we are not talking about a climate change, we are talking about a climate crisis. So our reaction needs to be different. You see how things have changed. So we need to have answers, and those answers have to be cohesive. Climate policy and biodiversity, these things have to be cohesive. The policy about energy has to be cohesive with the policy about economy. If we deal these things simply as a matter of technology, that creates a lot of reaction. And this is something that I've dealt extensively with. First of all, we need to have a spatial planning that says this project can be installed here, but not in another area, for example, like they do in Germany, like they do in other countries. Here, everyone, and we need to hear from all the local players in order to address that. We used to receive projects for approval, and the local people were not aware of what was to happen, did not really know whether a wind turbine would be installed or whatever. And that creates problems, obviously, because people feel that decisions are being taken without them being involved. Also, these projects have to be funded. The investment in these projects should not come only from large companies. It should come from the public as well, from the people. So we need to look at all those things, and there are many criteria to select, but a company, for example, would say that I want a maximum return, but the local community would say I want to preserve the environment. So in order to have a cohesive position, we need to discuss, all the players need to discuss between them and reach an agreement. If someone is headstrong and says that I'm going to get the license even if the local community does not want the project, well, that obviously creates a reaction. The local communities are do not always see the return on these projects. If they were involved in the investment, however, that would change. And if we look at different surveys, the reaction has to do with the fact that the public does not, local people do not participate in the investments and are not consulted before the decisions. But if we do not invest in nature, we will see a lot of destruction. We have already seen it during the summer with the fires and everything, or the extreme weather conditions. Biodiversity will continue to change if the climate change continues as such. On the other hand, spatial planning needs to consider the habitat. So we need to be the bridge between these things. We need to protect biodiversity, but we also need to promote RES, and there are tools to do that. We need rational solutions. I think you have given us a great opportunity here. Yes, just one last comment. I used to be in the I used to have this discussion before this massive reactions on the climate have actually taken place, and we tried to find a model in order to create a consensus. We didn't want to force investments. We want to promote them, but some preconditions must exist. Of course, obviously, spatial planning is, Mr. Koinomou is a very important factor in these discussions, and it's something that we hear a lot when you hear the reactions, negative reactions. We are expecting this spatial framework since many years now, but what would be the content of such planning in order to alleviate all those reactions? Okay. We will fix the clock. First of all, just the fact that we're going to have a spatial framework, that we do have it, is a factor that creates, that regularizes the whole thing. the framework means that there are rules, there are regulations, so it is a positive thing. Of course, these rules have to be correct and they have to be relevant to here and now. I think that this framework will be complete in about a year's time, but I will give you some of my views about what should be the axis of this special planning. And my understanding is that they are going to be the main axis of this of the new framework as well. The first thing is to review the rules that apply to date about two categories, the small islands and the high mountains. These have not been addressed in the past as special cases in the framework that we have today, but the new framework will address these topics, these areas that require some special handling. That in terms of the wind turbines, wind energy. The second thing, the special framework of 2009 that was actually prepared 15 years ago was based on the hypothesis of a standard wind turbine with the standard height of the time. Today, the largest wind wind turbine is twice the size of that previous. So we have the fact that we have different size for the blade, that changes the data on which the new framework is based. That means that we need to change the minimum distances between the wind turbines. And that also means that we need to review what we have to this date. The second point has to do with the licensing for the producers, RES producers. That is a problematic stage because it does not consider the spatial rules. Some requests, some applications are being accepted and approved, but that creates confusion, and to a large extent it creates the reaction of the local communities, and of course it creates a wrong impression of an overabundance of offer that is not true. The other point is that will reduce the pressure on onshore wind farms when we promote floating offshore wind parks. The other thing is that we are reviewing the rules regarding the landscape of the wind turbines. There are specific rules, but they are not right at this point. Now we have more experience and we are going to correct them. And we are going to have similar rules for the solar panels as well. When the framework was first established, we didn't know that photovoltaic panels would have such penetration, but this is the case now, so the new framework will reflect that. The entire spatial framework for the photovoltaics will be enhanced. Two new points. First, a regulatory framework for batteries for large storage stations. We didn't have that. That was a non-issue then. Now it is a hot topic. And also the hydrogen. We are going to include this in the spatial framework as well. Because of storage, because of transport, it's perhaps the future of energy, so we need to include it. Do I have 3 minutes? Or maybe 30 seconds. The first, we're going to incorporate the cumulative effect from different plants, whether photovoltaic or wind parks. This cumulative effect was not taken into consideration, and that will create certain safeguards for more flexibility. So it has to be more rigid, but also more flexible at the same time. That's two things at once. And then the transport network, of course, And in the past, the regulatory frameworks were very, very rigid with their numbers, with the figures that they included. This new framework will give the opportunity to use new tools for planning and differentiate the figures, the rules posed by the framework within certain limits, of course. And that will help communities to make their decisions. You have given us an idea. Of course, you seem to have a better understanding of what's going to take place, so that was all useful. I will now ask again Mr. Mitsopoulos, because special planning does cover the entire country, but there is a special challenge that has to do with protected areas, Natura areas, that cover about 1/3 of the area of the country. Based on the regulatory framework that we do have right now, how are RES going to be treated in terms of these areas? With regard to licensing of RES projects, of course, RES cannot be treated differently than any other project that is proposed to take place in such areas. About a year and a half ago, with Mr. Hatzidakis, the law from Mr. Hatzidakis and Mr. Economou, it was established, we established the Organization for the Environment and Climate Change. This organization, its main goal is to manage the Natura 2000 areas and implement their special plans. But one of its responsibilities is to provide an opinion on whether or not the proposed project can actually take place in a Natura area or not. Why did this happen? And why did we establish this solution and this organization? It was said a little while back that, Mrs. Christopoulou, it's not possible to approve a project in a Natura area and then not approve another project. It's not possible to have monitoring programs that are different in protected areas. So we wanted to have an organization that will be fully operational in a couple of months, and this organization will have 200 employees all over Greece to provide opinions, which means that we save time in approving the proposals, and finally with providing licenses, because investors cannot wait for 2 or 3 years to get an opinion. We are preparing the human resources to do that. We provide scientific knowledge to the personnel. We are training them. On November 30, we conclude the training on a decision support system tool that will help to provide an opinion on such areas. And we think that by by addressing the issue as such, we're going to make all the reactions soften things, because people are going to understand that decisions are taken based on scientific information, scientific data. They are rational, and that will help us overcome all those negative reactions. It's good that you mentioned this new organization. Hopefully you will have the managing plans shortly. And the environmental impact studies, so you can use this tool along with the new spatial planning framework. Yes, these are all very important things. Mr. Chrysogelos, we talked about the role of the state, but when you concluded your last comment, you talked about the role of the citizens, of the public in the development. And I wanted to ask you, if you can say a few words more, how you see it's a way to alleviate all these reactions, and how can we do that? How can we use the citizens to do that? let's say that about a decade ago, in the midst of the crisis, there were a lot of conspiracy theories that were trying to get that we could use the oil and hydrocarbons and become rich and like Saudi Arabia and whatever. That myth is continues to be alive because of the government saying that we are giving away 1/3 of the country in order to do mining and such like that. And we are also talking about how we can cover, how we can transition to RES by using natural gas. So we need to provide a clear message to society that we are going to this new era, the green era, without using any fossil fuels. We cannot stop the funding of natural gas, continue the funding of natural gas projects, and then at the same time make plans for investments in RES when we are actually promoting natural gas to the public. We need to, anything that is related to fossil fuel, we should shut it down. Otherwise, we are giving mixed signals to the public. The other thing is that people are now spectators, but we want them to become producers, and that requires new models in the city. We are talking about blockchain, we're talking about flexible schemes that can produce electricity in buildings, in companies. I know that from my experience, that if you are proposing innovative solutions, then you're excluded from all the subsidy programs. So that all these subsidy programs should give motives to the people. In order to achieve the transition, we need to take everyone with us. So we need a different concept, all society together, not leaving anyone behind. We need to move towards the green transition, give them the opportunity to reduce their electricity bills, for example, and give them the opportunity to participate in large schemes, large vehicles, give them the opportunity to participate in producing energy at their own building. These are not new models that we create, the Greens create, imagine. These are models that are being implemented in associations, different associations. In Belgium, for example, one of them has a capital of 55 million euro, and they don't need any banking, any financing from banks. This kind of initiative is going to change how people think about RES. Because right now, what do they think? Citizens think that they come these large companies that used to deal with petroleum and gas, and now they want to make money out of the sun and out of the wind. Okay, they understand that we need to move towards a greener economy, but they don't want to pay for that. And now, in the midst of this crisis, we have an increase in the energy cost, and people do not understand why they need to pay 3 times as much. We need to provide financial tools, democratic tools, investment tools, so that everywhere these investments can take place everywhere. Thank you, Mr. Chrysogelos and Mr. Tsolakidis. And let's say that the Greens are going to have a discussion with the General Secretary to discuss the new special planning. And each region in Greece should produce the share of the energy that their share of the energy. So each region should have a specific target. So I'm sure that we are going to hear more about that. Mr. Tsolakidis, how do you see the role of the state in enhancing the energy transition.
I think I will agree with Mr. Chrysogelos. The environmental movement has done its work. It has persuaded the society regarding the tools that are necessary to tackle the environmental crisis and the climatic crisis, and of course continues to table proposals to the government in order to enable it to play its role to persuade the people that these tools, these methods are transparent, reliable, and that they protect both the environment and the people, the citizens. The reasons that have imposed the use of RIS to tackle the climatic crisis, the same reasons are the same that impose on us to invest in renewable energy resources, and any reactions are more or less similar. So we have to find ways to persuade the people that these investments will be in favor of the environment and not against it. This is therefore what is needed today. In any case, these reactions, even if they are not even if they are not understandable, if they are not based on evidence, and they are irrational, and we are going to hear more about them, are there. And the biggest problem is not these reactions, but the lack of networks and infrastructures. Do you know that we have a number of small investments in line, waiting, thousands all over the country, with under 1 megawatt production, which all in all might even be of the order of 4 gigawatt, that are waiting for infrastructure. For example, we have 6 million houses. Imagine that each of these houses, individual properties, uses one single solar panel. We are not only see our needs covered, but also make money out of it. So please, and we insist on that the government should take measures, transparent, reliable and efficient measures, and I agree fully with Mr. Christopoulos. Each local authority needs to have its own program for the production and consumption of energy, and especially of renewable energy. We have heard a lot about wind energy. It is not one of the most mature types of energy, but we are already using it. We have seen a number of problems. What do you think about the reactions? What can we do? What do you propose to avoid the involvement of police, the blocking of roads, etc.? First of all, wind energy is friendly for the environment. It's environmentally friendly because it also contributes to tackling the environmental crisis, the climatic crisis. If any project having been examined, proves to be bad for the environment, then it is not it is not realized. It is we can forget it. But the problem is simplification, and simplification of the rules and procedures is closely linked to a public reaction. When we request that all decisions are taken within 2 years, we have a reason to do so. There are investment plans that have been lagging around for decades. This is not possible. And because it is necessary to see any project that is tabled for approval in its current framework. And of course, without the use of maps that actually create a lot of misunderstandings. The inhabitants of the islands do not need to know technical or details. When we had last measured certain parameters, we had found specific numbers. Why should they increase now? Then there is an issue of politics, and the issue of political responsibility is not should not allow us, or should not promote the non-acceptance of personal responsibility by the public. Let us not forget that any effects that wind energy might have are local reactions, are local effects, and well known. A wind farm, in addition to enabling the local community to have very low energy cost for years or even decades, has certain predictable effects. The third thing that I would like to mention is participation. This discussion is difficult because participation is related to cost. A low cost and low production cost and low consumption cost ensures the so-called scale economy. There is an issue of participation, and my opinion is that this is not related so much to the cost of energy, but to the citizens not having understood anything about the economies of scale that these forms of energy provide. And the reason is that the production is right now very low and very ineffective, and forces these companies to increase the end cost to the consumer in order to be able to survive. And a last comment, again regarding participation. It is true that investment participation is very important, but there are also other benefits. There are now small, rural, isolated communities which will be warmed and also supplied with power thanks to the 1% of renewable energy produced by wind farms. We should not forget that. It is easy to discuss or agree in principle. but the hot issues, the hot potatoes are on the field. Very frequently we hear that people do not want big wind farms. We want a farm that covers the needs of the place, the needs of the community. For example, I have installed a wind farm on Naxos, which was welcomed by 7 villages, but the city of Naxos itself did not want it there. So, it all relates to priorities. So this and this of course does not this of course relates to all these reactions. A last question to Mr. Economo, and I would like to ask him to be very brief. We have we are planning to a new land plan, but what would that plan need to be acceptable? First of all, it has to correspond and satisfy the needs of the local communities and of all the users. A favorable factor for the acceptance of this new land plan is that land use plan is that many of the opinions expressed at local level have already been taken into consideration in the design of the land use plan. We also believe that we need a permanent, extended commission that will meet from time to time to discuss issues of interest. I have tried to establish such a commission, but I have not achieved, so I'm tabling this proposal again. I think that such a commission with the participation of the investors, of the producers, of the public and of the state and other stakeholders would be able to study and discuss and propose solutions not only once a year or every 3 months, but on a permanent basis. You understand that talking about renewable energy sources and speaking about their contribution to protecting the environment and quantifying it and saying it's 40%, it's completely mad, it's completely crazy, it's completely absurd. And I'm afraid that there is a misunderstanding. A permanent extensive committee to discuss these issues might be a very positive step to understanding renewable energy resources and their potential. I think that we should actually note this proposal about the land uses bill. I think that it will be done, and because we have been very consistent as far as our political targets are, and we have a political commitment of the responsible authorities. So I hope that this will proceed, this will go forward. We would like to close at this point. I would like to thank you, especially for the time that I took. The overtime is entirely my responsibility, but you should understand that we had a lot of pending issues, very hot issues. So I would like to thank Mr. Zoupis, Mr. Konou, Mr. Mitsopoulos, Mr. Papastamateou, Mr. Chrysogelos, Mr. Tsolatakis, and Mr. Orthanos, and wish you good evening.